Hello everyone, welcome to Nanotech YouTube channel. Today we are going to develop a steel structure which you can see in the drawing. So this is our steel structure which we will be developing in Creo today. So this is the main structure, these are the legs. Here is the grating, or you can install a checker plate here. Then we have these handrails and we have this ladder. So let's start with the development of this structure. So this is our initial interface of Creo Parametric 9.0. So first I will start with new part solid, and then I will uncheck it, and I will use MMNS part solid ABS. So this is our initial interface. Okay, so let's start first with the front plane, and then we will use the extrude command. So here today we will be using the palette command, and from palette I can start choosing four-sided square, and we have multiple options here. So this is polygons, these are some shapes, profiles and stars. So in profile I need to use maybe the L profile, but later on. So first I will start with the square. So you need to drag it and drop here, and you will close it. So this is our square. The dimensions and details you can check from here, and we will say OK. So this is the square tube. Now I need to change its dimension to 100 by 100. So this is done. Now I will say OK. So you can see it is extruded. Now let's go back to the drawing. So this is 1500 plus 500, so it is 2000 by 2000 structure. So this one I will say 2000. Okay, so this is the width of the profile. Okay, so now this is done, and I will say OK. Now we have multiple options to develop it further. I mean, I can start choosing the pelleting, or I can start extruding from this point. So let's do it again. So I will select first this plane. Okay, this one. I will choose this one, and I will go for extrude. Then again I will use palette. Then I will drag and drop it here, and I will close it. So this is now done, and I will say OK. Again I will change it to 100 millimeter. Okay, and from here to this point I will say 0, and from this point till this point I will say 0. So it is exactly lying on the corner of this initial square tube. So I will say OK here. Again the dimension I will keep it as 2000. So you can see the L shape is created, and I will say OK. Now again I have to now start working on this plane. So I will say I will choose this plane. I will go for extrude. Then I will choose the palette again. So this one I will drag and drop here, and I will say OK. So this one 100 by 100. So again I need to coincident them. So I will say 0 here, and from this point to this point I will say 0, and I will click OK. Again this one I will keep it as 2000. So now we will have a U in place. You can see it's a kind of U. So now I need to start working on this plane. Again, I will add palette here. This one, and I'll say OK. This one I can keep it as 100, and again I will align this dimension to this point, which would be 0, and this line to this point. Say OK, and I will say OK, and this one I will keep 2000, and we will be having a closed loop in this case. OK, so now you can see it is a closed loop and all sides are of 2000 millimeter. So we have actually created this base frame first. Now we will install a checker plate on here on the top side. So in order to install a checker plate, I will choose this plane and I will say extrude. Then I will draw a corner rectangle or square. So I will be selecting this corner and then I will select this corner and I will say OK. So the sheet thickness I will keep it as 3 millimeter, and the rest is all OK, so I will say OK. So now you can see this is our structure and the checker plate is installed on the top. Okay. Okay, so now we will see here. Now we need to install legs of this structure, which I will keep the same as above, 100 by 100, and that would be 792 millimeter, the height from here to the base plate. So 792, and I have multiple options to create these legs, but I will choose the palette option here. So I will choose this plane, extrude, and then I will say palette. So here I will say OK, and this one I will keep it as 100. Okay, so from here to here I will say 0. From this point to this point I will say 0, and I will say OK. So what was the length? It was 792 millimeters. So here I will put 792 and I will say OK. So you can see one leg is generated. Now I have multiple options here that I can simply mirror this, but I don't have any planes that I can create. So just to let you know how we can mirror these supports, I will go for additional planes here. So okay, so what we can do, we are having one plane here, so we will make one in the center. So this support I will enter manually, and these two supports I will show you how to add them by using mirror command. So again I will choose this plane, extrude, palette, drag and drop, and I will say OK. This one 100 millimeter, and the dimensions I need to check from this point to this point here, from this point to this point here. So 0, and this one also 0, and I'll say OK. So this size I need to keep 792, 792 and I'll say OK. So you can see two legs are created. Now to show you how we can mirror these legs, I will make an additional plane which would be offset from this plane. So I will choose this plane and total width is 2000, so I will offset it to 1000. So here is our additional plane and I will say OK. Now I will choose extrude 7 and extrude 6 and I will simply mirror them, and this will be our mirror plane, and I will say OK. So you can see OK. So the total dimension was 2000. But the plane which we have taken as reference was not in the center, so that is why it went offset. So what we can do, we can still modify this datum to 1050 like this, and I will say OK. So now you can see all these legs are exactly below this steel structure. So now what we need to do, we will add base plates here. So in order to prepare the base plates, I will click here, again extrude. OK. Then I will check the dimensions. So the base plate dimensions are missing, so we will keep it as 150 by 150 in detail. So let's take it from here, so we are sure that this is all good. So I will keep the dimensions from here. So horizontal constraint I can remove. This one I will keep it as 150. And this one 150. Okay, so this is done now, and I will say OK. This thickness of this plate I will keep it as 10 millimeter, and I will say OK. So now you can see the base plate is created. Okay, now we need to make two holes here. So again I will choose extrude cut, and I will draw two circles here. So this is our support and this is our internal support. So somewhere here I will make a round of 16 millimeter, which will be M6. So I need to see the dimensions of this from this point, let's say 50, and then again I need a circle here somewhere. This one again I will keep it as 16, M16, and I will take the dimension from this point to this point, which would be 50. So from this point I just keep it as 50. Now I will check the dimension of this one from this point to this point. So this one we can keep it as 120, and similarly I need to see the dimension from this point to this point, which will be 120. So now all these holes are in place, and I will say OK, and I will just flip their direction, and I will say remove material and say OK. So in this way you can see the base plate is now created, I will simply choose this one. Okay, so now I need another plane, so I will choose this one and I will add another plane, so 1050 in minus. Okay, so this is our additional plane. Now we are having two planes, so I will simply okay, so this one and this one I will mirror from this plane, and this one I will mirror from this plane, and this one again I will take the mirror from this plane. So in this way all these sides will have a base plate. All these legs are having now the base plate. So the bottom structure is complete. From here we can remove the shadings at the moment, and you will see a clear picture of the structure. So let's start with this handrails now. So the handrails are developed from here. You can see there is a base plate also, but we will see if we need to install it or not. So let's start with that one. So from here I will use the extrude, and then I will choose the circle here, and I will simply mark a circle here like this. So 50, pipe of 50 or 40 should be fine for a handrail, so I will say OK. So now you can see what is the height, 1021. So this height I can change to 1021, and I'll say OK. OK. So the same thing, I will mirror it along this plane, and this one I will mirror along this plane, and the new one I will again mirror from this plane. So all these handrails are in place now. Okay, so now I need another additional plane to draw the top handrail here. So in the drawing it says two handrails, so I will try to draw two additional planes here. So first will be offset from this one, and it would be in this direction, and the total height would be 1021. So 1021, so you can see it is exactly on the top of this, and I will say OK. Then again I need another plane starting from this point. So 1021 half would be roughly 510. So the direction I need to flip minus 510, and I will say OK. Now I need to choose this plane, and I will draw a circle here, 40 millimeter, and I'll say OK. So I will keep it both as variable 2000, or to be precise, let's keep it as 1020 or 1022. So this looks better. So similarly 1021 would be on the other side, and I'll say OK. So now you can see this handrail is included. The same handrail we would do mirror. So I'll say mirror along this plane. So we are having another handrail here. Then I'll say OK. Again I will choose this plane, extrude, and I will choose circle here. So 40. And I will make it both variable, and 1021, and this one also 1021, and I'll say OK. So now we have another handrail. Again I will mirror it from along this plane, and I'll say OK. So that's all. Now I will add another plane here to the upward side around at 255 here, and now I will choose all these supports. Okay, so extrude this one, and then we have extrude, no, okay, this mirror and this mirror. So we will make them all mirror along this plane, and I'll say OK. So now all these handrails are in place, and we can make this as a round by using the round command, but at the moment we will leave it like this to save the time. So you can see this is the structure which is created now. And now we will create a okay. So here I will again use the extrude command, and we will draw a here. Okay. So this 110 should be okay, and I'll say okay. And you can see this one I can keep it to 3 millimeter, and I'll say okay. So similarly this one I will okay. So what was the width of it? Edit section. Okay, so the width was 110. I will simply say OK and OK. So 110 we need to keep same here. So again I will choose this plane, extrude. So I will choose rectangle. So starting from this point to this point, and this dimension I will keep it as 110, and I'll say OK. So this one 3 millimeters, and I'll say OK. Again, I need the same plate along this plane, so I will choose extrude. Again rectangle, starting from this point to this point. So this is all okay, and I will say okay, and 3 millimeter. So this plate is also installed. Now the last one we will add again. We will choose this plane, extrude, and I will use the rectangle tool. Okay, so now all these guard plates are installed, which looks fine. Okay, so the steel structure is complete now. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share and subscribe my YouTube channel. Thank you so